Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Cup of Hope with Hope Against Trafficking and the Michigan Abolitionist Project. I'd like to go ahead and welcome today's panelists. We have Hannah McPeak, who's the Education Director for Hope Against Trafficking, and Emily Johnson, Program Coordinator at the Michigan Abolitionist Project. This week, we are honored to be joined by several guest panelists as we talk about the role of men in the fight against sexual exploitation. Our first special guest is David Troget. He is the founder and chief visionary officer of Redwood United. Redwood United is a strategic relational community of leaders and organizations committed to changing our world for good. Redwood United provides relationships and resources to help organizations accomplish their missions more effectively. Redwood United states that helping people in crisis and desperate need is the heartbeat behind their mission, whether they are directly equipping organizations meeting these needs, funding them through their impact fund, or empowering for-profit organizations to generate resources to be spent to this end. They are committed to answering the cries of those hurting and helping others as they would want to be helped. David and his wife, Kelly, and their 4 children live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our second special guest is Detective Lieutenant Ed Price of the Michigan State Police. He has been a part of the Michigan State Police since 1995. As a Michigan State Police Detective Lieutenant at the 2nd District Special Investigations Section, he supervises detectives in Southeast Michigan. He also investigates homicides, rapes, robberies, child sexual assaults, police shootings, public corruption, and other major crimes. Detective Lieutenant Price is also assigned to the Southeast Michigan Trafficking and Exploitation Crimes Task Force, or SEMTEC. SEMTEC is an FBI task force that was established in 2007 to investigate the exploitation of children by means of sex trafficking in southeastern Michigan. The task force responds to Amber Alerts for missing and abducted children in the state of Michigan and investigates major child sexual abuse material cases. The task force also investigates adult human trafficking matters. Detective Lieutenant Price is federally deputized by the FBI. He is instructed at several law enforcement centers on the topic of child exploitation and major sex trafficking criminal enterprises. He has been certified as an expert witness in sex trafficking in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee. He is a commissioner on the Michigan's Governor's Human Trafficking Commission. And our final guest panelist today is Haris Ahmed. An early passion for healthcare has led Haris to working and studying in the field of physical therapy for the past 5 years. He has obtained several experiences as a physical therapy technician in a multitude of medical settings, including outpatient hospitals and nursing homes. In 2018, he graduated from Oakland University in Rochester Hills, Michigan, and received a bachelor's in health science with a concentration in pre-physical therapy. Haris commenced his Doctor of Physical Therapy degree in 2019 at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions in Provo, Utah. During his studies there, Haris has undertaken a leadership role in coordinating and participating in biweekly discussions about health disparities. In October of 2020, he completed his initial clinical rotation at All Pro Physical Therapy in Canton, Michigan. And his commitment to restoring the quality of life of individuals he treats, establishing therapeutic alliance with his coworkers and patients, and providing evidence-based care guides, his motivation for working in the physical therapy. From there, I will go ahead and turn it over to our guests and our panelists.
Thank you, Kendra.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, welcome to A Cup of Hope. David, Ed, and Haris, we're so excited and so glad that you guys could join us for this discussion. So we are talking about the role of men in the fight against sexual exploitation. Now, we know that sexual exploitation can happen to anybody, right? Wherever there's vulnerability, exploitation can happen. And we know that it can happen to men, women, children. Now, the other thing that we do know for sure is that women need to lead the fight in this movement, okay? Because given 90% of victims of rape and sexual assault are women and girls. But just as important, men need to step up as allies and come alongside women in the fight against sexual exploitation. And so today we have this amazing panel of guests who will engage in this conversation with us. And so let's begin.
That's right. Thanks, guys. Yes, so I'm going to read off some statistics for you guys and just see how they make you feel, if you have any comments. So every 73 seconds, and these were provided by RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. Ages 12 to 34 are the highest risk years for rape and sexual assault, with 54% of sexual assault victims between the ages of 18 and 34. 15% of those between the ages of 12 to 17 years old. So the younger generations are definitely more vulnerable. 1 out of 6 American women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape. 1 in 6, 82% of all juvenile victims are female, and 90% of adult rape victims are female, as Hannah said. Women ages 18 to 24 who are college students are 3 times more likely than women in general to experience sexual violence. Females not enrolled in college in this age group are 4 times more likely. And 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence. And I do have some statistics about men. As for men, about 3% of American men, or 1 in 33, have experienced an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. So it's about 1 in 33 for men and an average of 1 in 6 for women for attempted or completed rapes. And 1 out of every 10 rape victims are male. Did I just contradict myself? Okay. But as for men, about 3% of American men have experienced or attempted an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. It's a lot. American Indians are twice as likely to experience a rape or sexual assault compared to all other races. And then we also have some statistics about the people who are perpetrating these crimes. But I just wanted to see if any of you guys have any comments about the statistics I've shared so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting, it's heartbreaking. And, as a husband and a father, I can't, and I have so many friends, I actually have friends who I know are those statistics, have been those. And so I think, for me, I'm instantly thinking in terms of real people, real people that I know. And it's just a heartbreaking, horrific thing that especially, people that I have spoken to can feel so much shame and guilt, even as a victim, and how enslaving that can be. So, I mean, that's my first response and reaction. And I fight for me to hear statistics, personal and real, because I think that that attitude of heartbreak has to permeate how we approach this topic. So that's my initial response. Is I'm thinking about my 17-year-old daughter, or my 16-year-old daughter, or my 14-year-old daughter. So, yeah.
David?
I think for me, it's really a reality check, I think, to see these statistics. And I think it's important, to have this information, to be aware of it. But really, I think kind of like what was mentioned before by David, I think that it's just, I don't want to say shocking, but it's just a jump forward into reality of what's actually happening, and to understand what's happening is, I believe, the first step to making a change. So to me, when I see stats like this, that's how I feel.
I did also want to mention 33% of women who are raped contemplate suicide. 13% of women who are raped attempt suicide, which is pretty unfortunate as well. And there's also statistics to say, you know, the amount of violence that women in sex work experience specifically, the percentage of women who suffer from PTSD symptoms, who have been sexually assaulted, or who are sex workers or been involved or have been trafficked, the amount of PTSD, suicide ideation, it affects them for a very, very long time. And the act itself can last, you know, minutes, I don't know, longer, obviously, but the effects are often very long lasting.
I would say the stats definitely do. I would say like hit you in the gut. It's that reality check of, that this is going on. I know as part of my job, I see it a lot, but I think it's important that the general public actually knows what's going on, and see the actual numbers, the data that's coming in to show that this exists. And then on top of the sexual assault, just in terms of how this is also playing a role into human trafficking and the victims in that world as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. So
that was why, we felt it was so important to share these statistics, because, man, if we don't have a clear understanding at the very minimum that this is so real and that this is happening and it is impacting our fellow human beings,
mm-hmm.
In such a dramatic and such a profound way, then how can we impact change? I think Horace was, said that if we don't understand that or don't even have the realization that this is so real, how can we step in and make a change?
Mm-hmm. So that is where we want to head this conversation today. How can we start to make that change? But we did want to begin by asking, what do you guys think about when you hear the term sexual exploitation? What do you think about it? What do you think when you hear about it? How do you define it? Anyone want to share their thoughts on sexual exploitation?
Sure, I'll start. I think when, at least me personally, when I think about it in terms of my line of work and also being a father, I think about, the definition that occurs when someone is abused or exploited. And it's based off of their sexuality. And of course, they don't have that person's consent. So it could be, comments that are made. It could be pictures that you're taking of someone, video, or snooping on someone's phone and looking through some of their personal information. So I think there's, it's almost like an onion, whereas you peel back the layers, it's a lot to it. And it depends on your upbringing. I think it comes to what you're used to and just the society that you live in.
And it's exploiting another person's sexuality without their consent. Is that correct? So without them knowing or without their consent?
Correct.
Yeah, I just think about how desensitized our culture has become to these issues, and technology and the internet has just fast forwarded that people are wanting to take things into the physical realm. And I think that's one of the things that I think people have desensitized to, related to the porn industry and online porn, and they think that, well, it's just something online. But what they're missing is that these kind of issues are always progressive. It's always a slippery slope towards some teenage boy. And I even have initial conversations with my 10-year-old son. We're not, I'm kind of gauging that, but I'm already engaging with him to prepare him for the onslaught that he is about to be surrounded with, because it's not innocent. And even the pictures that you're seeing, as there's almost, I don't know what the statistics are, but there's not consent in many of those places, or that girl has been so abused so many times that she feels she's not worth anything more than that. And so, you know, many times those images or videos are of people being trafficked, and then it gets into men's minds and boys' minds and starts playing in their mind, and then they're wanting to bring it into the physical. And so I think you know, I think for us as men to realize that we have to open the dialogue. I think for men who are going to be responsible, we have to open the dialogue with those that we care about and that we love, and even that we're wanting to influence. Because, you know, if you talk about 1 in 3 women, I mean, you get a room, you're standing in line at Chick-fil-A, you know, 1 in 3 of these women have been, oh, is it 1 in 6? Oh, 1 in 6. I'm sorry. I thought it was 33%. So, but 1 in 6. So that's still significant, who have actually experienced that. But then in this really porn obsessed culture that we have, you know, even TikTok, you know, so I think in terms of my girls and this gateway of how they're being funneled, everything is towards desensitizing these boys and desensitizing these girls, that they're okay sending a pic back when the boy asks for her to send nudes. I mean, that's just the world. My girls have friends, and she's like, that's just completely normal. This is coming from my 17 and 16-year-old. That is a path towards the statistics that we're talking about. That's how our hearts are drawn. And so I think for us to raise awareness not only about that, but also the funnel that our culture is like funneling men and girls to be like, men, you should want this, and girls, you should be fine giving this. And then
Yes.
you know, a girl says no, and then a guy's like, this is my right, and that's completely horrific that he thinks that he can take. But it doesn't just start at rape. It starts at 13-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 20-year-old men that are okay with porn in their, you know, video games and those kind of things. So it's an epidemic that we have to be able to speak about. The gateway drugs, which are getting worse and worse and harder, and it's like acclimating our culture to be okay with these horrific acts. So,
David, I love that you called it a gateway drug, and that's exactly what I was just going to ask. Was how does our culture impact this issue? What are the things being thrown at youth today that impacts this issue? And you had mentioned, you know, TikTok, social media, Instagram, the movies we watch, pornography. I love that you mentioned all that. Does anyone else want to make some comments about our culture?
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned pornography, and I think that unfortunately, pornography has become so normalized in our society, whether it's through media, watching movies, or through, you know, talking to your friends, growing up, being surrounded by it, and ease of access to. It's just so easy to be able to go online and access any sort of pornography. And I know Pornhub releases statistics on their categories and their just all sorts of information. And I know that there's been an increase in categories like BDSM and things like that. And so for me, that scares me because I know that there are millions and millions of people watching every day. And to see these things, even if you don't watch that specific category, I think it's dangerous just to see that it's there and that it's approved of, that it's accepted, that it's allowed to even be there in the first place. So I think that taking it from there and putting it into reality is so dangerous because of the normalization that it can really cause in our minds. So I think that that's a huge part of the rape culture that's going on.
Okay, so I'm really glad that you brought that up, Paris. Well, where my mind went was when Ed was talking about what basically what sexual exploitation is, and you define it, right? We understand what it is. I mean, it's but it gets so diluted. The understanding of or the perspective of what sexual exploitation is becomes so diluted because of this cultural comfort. I don't know how else to put it, or this we've become so normalized to some of these pretty extreme behaviors, right? I mean, it's like pushing the bar further and pushing the bar further, which really then distorts what sexual exploitation is, and we forget what's happening, that the lines are being crossed. They are. Just because we're justified by creating these cultural norms, maybe, or behavioral norms, it does not change the fact that sexual exploitation has happened, is happening. And all of these things that we may think is, culturally is normal, it's just so still not. It doesn't change what it is that's happening,
And I think Dave made a very good point when he called it the gateway drug. And I would even take it a little bit further to say it's almost like as a society that we are grooming our own boys and girls at a younger age to make it easier for the perpetrators to lure them in where they actually become, victims, and they're actually taken advantage of physically.
And if you sit by and do nothing, then you're helping the cause. If you realize these things and aren't engaging actively, then you're sort of allowing it to happen.
That's right. I do want to mention too, rape culture, or, commonly said, those women were asking for it, victim blaming, not believing women, just surrounding women in shame. So I had, there's several myths or false beliefs out there that some people believe that kind of shifts the blame from the perpetrator to that victim. So I just want to read a couple of these and see what you guys think. Rape and sexual assault are both are about sexual attraction and gratification. It's not really rape when a person changes their mind in the middle of sexual activity. Ooh, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about that. Not really rape when a person changes their mind in the middle of it. They already said yes, they can't change their mind.
Well, of course, we all know that that is false. It's all about consent at any point, no matter where you're at and that stage, that the female or male can say no, and that means you need to stop.
I've also read that men who purchase sex have said once they pay the woman, she has to do whatever he says, that he's paid for it and he should be able to get what he's paid for. She can't turn back at that point.
Well, of course, that's wrong on multiple levels, because first, it's already against the law to pay for it. So you shouldn't even be at that spot in life where you're purchasing sex for someone. So you're already breaking the law and you're already victimizing that person. And then I go back to the first one of whenever someone says no, you have to stop.
Mm-hmm. What about when it comes to sex, men can be provoked to a point of no return, that this sexual beast just takes over them and they can't control themselves. If a person doesn't fight back, then they weren't really raped. That's really interesting when you guys think about that.
As far as commenting on men being provoked to a point of no return, I mean, obviously that's not right. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It's not like something you're doing where you completely lose your mind in the situation and you lose all points of thinking, all logic, exactly common sense. I think men just have to be better at that point. I mean, and it's not even being better. It's really just being a decent human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually really want to retract what I said when I said better, really just being a normal person and creating a safe environment rather than thinking of yourself so much where you're like, okay, well, if this isn't happening, then I'm just going to keep going. I mean, I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these conversations are, and even these myths are coming out of a belief that that sex is just a biological need that we have, and so we have to check that box, as opposed to, the obvious with procreation is part of how all of us are here, because two people experience something together. But I believe that sexual intimacy is meant to happen inside of the context of a loving, intimate relationship where people are not being demanded of something, but giving joyfully, and in a healthy, thriving relationship. And so I think for us as men who see this brokenness in our culture related to marriage and families sticking together, I think we need to we need to, one, set example of what we're requiring of ourselves. Part of how I'm protecting my daughters is how I treat my wife in front of them. What does our relationship look like? And what so many young men haven't seen is a father who loves their mother. That is so absent from our culture. But I think for us to be able to live lives that are compelling, that show that any type of relationship with a prostitute or a woman who is not consenting is so far down on the counterfeit level. Like, dudes, you are missing out so much. You're settling for, like, that type of sexual interaction is like just a disgusting counterfeit that you're happy with. And so I think raising the bar on what this is supposed to be, how wonderful it is when there's a relationship where people love each other and are giving of themselves freely, is so beautiful and so enjoyable for everyone. That is, I think, part of what can identify the counterfeit. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but you hear about people studying counterfeit bills, and what do to learn how to know counterfeit bills is they study the real thing. They don't study counterfeit, and they study the real thing, and then when they see the counterfeit, they're like, and it doesn't mean that the allure and the strategy of our culture to desensitize and to elevate really like this animalistic approach towards sexuality. But I think that's part of how we as men can be part of changing the voice, at least with everyone within earshot of our lives.
That
That's
is
powerful.
so well said and so refreshing to hear. It's like we're all sort of like processing that, but that's extremely well said. I think that when we engaging in the culture that we're engaging in, I mean, it's so easy to kind of forget about that realness when you think about sexuality, sexual intimacy. I mean, it is 100% a relationship between two people, and we lose that. We sort of lost that in our culture. This brings me to think about like how hard it is though for young boys growing up, the way they talk to each other, the pressure to sort of be this like masculine dude, like I don't know. I mean, what do you guys like? Because we see the beauty of what David's talking about in the relationship and but then you've got this totally opposing like environment that boys and men are living in sort of. Am I even saying that? Does that make sense what I'm saying? And you know
Yeah, it makes sense. And I still think there's a difference between being, a man, masculinity, and all that, but you don't have to exploit women. And I think that comes down to men being men and talking to their young boys at a young age and explaining the difference and explaining how to show respect for another woman or, that other girl. And I think even in the locker room that guys can be held accountable to when talk goes the wrong way to say, hey, dude, really, I don't want to hear that. You wouldn't talk like that if that was your sister, if that was your mom. So, guys will do stuff and they'll talk about women, but if they think about it being a family member, be it their wife or their daughter, then that changes things. So they will, objectify another woman's body, but if it's their daughter, then it's not okay. So I think as men, if you could just have those glasses on or that mindset whenever you're talking or dealing with women, that will maybe sort of change your mind and they might not say what they're thinking or what popped in their head.
Right. And you just provided one of the ways that boys can be allies, in changing some of that, but having a figure in your life teaching you that and talking to you about those things. But that's exactly sort of what I want to get at is, that is one of the ways that you can ally and come alongside.
Not just be a bystander. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I feel pretty passionate about this specific topic. I consider myself a relatively emotional guy. I don't know whether that's I have two younger sisters or I listen to R&B or whatever. And despite that, when I am with my friends, I find myself holding back a lot of times, whether it's with locker room talk or with objectification of women. I don't know why. I find myself holding back my true thoughts at times. Of course, not every time. And when I go back and I'm by myself and I'm just kind of reflecting on the situation and the conversation, I first think I'm like, okay, well, this isn't a big deal. It's just in our group. We're just kind of talking about these things. It's a little problem. But then I think about it and I think that these little problems can really add up. And again, it goes back to the normalization. How are myself and my friends and their friends and my friends, and this ripple effect, how are we all going to conduct ourselves in society? I think that these little problems can lead to extreme actions of sexual exploitation. So really just kind of reflecting on a reminder to be better myself and to try to stop it at the root of the problem, which is just these little discussions that don't seem like a big deal. And that can lead to, greater acts of more extreme acts.
Yeah, I think Horace's point is so, so central to the solution, is that we can feel so overwhelmed. I know I can, even hearing these statistics or looking at, okay, how do I change the TikTok culture, right? So I'm not going to change TikTok, as a one person, but each of us in the circle of relationships or people that we interact with have to speak. And I think, I've felt the same thing, Horace. So you're not alone. Like in situations you can be like, well, I don't want to say that. I don't want to sound like like a crazy abolitionist, right? And yet, I went running this morning with a group of about 13 guys. We went running. It was like really cold. It was like 29 degrees here in Charlotte. And for us, that's kind of cold. Not Michigan, I understand. But for us, that was cold. And, so those relationships, or a coach on a junior basketball team, to be speaking to these issues, and whether it be with our coworkers. And I think knowing how can we talk about it in kind of a winsome way, or even just be like, dudes, I just watched this podcast or this Cup of Hope and they said, all this stuff is happening. Have you ever heard about that? Or like, have you ever thought about that? Or you don't have to have this eloquent, you know, let me share a defense of this view and like talk about all these statistics. It's, I think, opening the dialogue with those who are near to us. And in the circles, whether it's 3 people or whether it's a basketball team of 7 people or whatever it is, saying, hey, that's not too small for me to open the dialogue up.
I like that. My next question was going to be, how can we begin to reshape culture and begin to hold other men accountable? So yeah, like you guys had said, initiate open and honest conversations, which is kind of hard to do with a stranger. So starting with your close friends and your, you know, your circles, your close circles, so that you can really be honest and vulnerable with one another. Calling out negative or harmful talk or behaviors, not just being a bystander. I really want to talk a little bit more about pornography. How can we reshape or have conversations, healthy conversations about pornography? Or do men even understand the risks of or the harmful effects that pornography can have on our brains, their hearts, relationships, the world?
You know, I'm glad that, because the other thing I just want to challenge you to think about, how you think about that question, is because when we think about, you know, how men can get involved, some of that is just not clicking buttons, right? And because pornography is so available, right? It's just, you're clicking the button. You're by yourself. I'm sitting by myself with my laptop. How could I be hurting anybody? In fact, you're perpetuating the issue of trafficking and exploiting and all those things. So, you know, the simple is not hitting that button and closing the laptop and walking away.
Right, not hitting the button, not sharing it, or how, you know, guys will see a video and want to share it with other people. I, you know, think it's just men holding themselves accountable before they hold other men accountable. And it's surprising how even if you make a small comment to a group when they start to talk about something like that and you bring it up, well, you know, that sort of offends me because of this. I have a daughter, or, you know, I've seen this happen, you know, through my job. So this isn't, you know, like a crime that's happening where there's not a victim. No, there's a victim behind that crime. There's a victim behind that video. And I think it's just important to have that, you know, conversation and just be that guy. And surprisingly, guys and men will respect that when you bring it up, and that'll get them to think, well, maybe I won't make that comment, or at least I won't make it around, you know, Ed, but at least, you know, they're starting to see it and think about it. Because I think it's going to be a process to change society as a whole, and just men in general. It takes time.
Yeah, I think identifying, or even, you know, let's say, you know, we are somewhere and somebody else is talking about a video like that or sharing something, and even having the concept of, you know, that's somebody's daughter, or, you know, like, you know, a concept that we talk with our kids about is, you know, we say, hey, let's pretend that is, you know, somebody else is dating your future spouse, and would you be okay with them doing those things with your future spouse, you know, or would you be okay with, and so like flipping it to where it's a personal, like, that those people in that video are people, you know, and I think identifying that and personalizing, humanizing, you know, that those things. So I think even a simple question like, dude, that is somebody's little girl. Like, how are their parents feeling right now? How is potentially she feeling? And I think flipping it on, I think one of those myths related to, if we're talking about porn or even sexual interaction, and saying, well, you know, the girls are happy with that, they like that, or, and I've seen some interviews with even, ex porn stars who are like coming out and saying, every one of us are suicidal, every one of the women, and they're craving for someone to care about them, and they're being abused and they're crying themselves to sleep at night. So I think even that kind of awareness, I hope can like spoil the lie of what pornography really is, and at least get into their brain when they are either thinking about looking at something or they are watching something, to question, this isn't real. It's actually a very horrific experience for this young woman.
That's right, David. I mean, they're actors and actresses at the end of the day. And so a lot of it is an act and fake. And so it's perpetuating this idea in young men's minds that, oh, women like that. Look how she loves it. Oh, okay. All women must be that way. Or so then it creates these false expectations
Right.
of their significant other or of girls in general that, oh, they like being hit. Oh, they like being choked. Oh, that's just normal. And if they don't like it, then it's teaching girls at the same time, like, oh, I'm supposed to like that? That hurts. I don't enjoy that. So it's just encouraging these acts of this violence, really. And Horace, were you going to say something?
I guess two quick things that I wanted to say. Maybe it's already been said, but one relating to what David said about how sex really should be this sort of intimate, like beautiful connection you have with someone, and instead of a daily thing that you view on your laptop for 5 minutes. And I guess if I could speak personally, I used to be a consumer of pornography about a half year ago, until I really started delving more into human trafficking and understanding these statistics, and then I completely stopped. But when I did, I would do it, and then afterwards I would just have this weird empty feeling inside. I mean, and I would just want to X my browser out right away. Like, what is this? What am I looking at right now? It was like I almost came into my senses. And so I just think it's important to know and understand that it does desensitize, because it's just so easy to do, really. And I think that's a big problem. And number two, I think it is a good step to raise awareness by placing, like maybe like my younger sister into the situation, or someone's spouse, or I think that's a great step for sure. And if that's what we need to do to raise awareness and to stop men from consuming these things, that's awesome. But how can we like be better than that? I mean, like, and I totally agree. I'm not disagreeing with anything that anyone said. I think that's a great first step. But I hope that we as men can, not just relate it to someone that's personal to us, and just be able to see that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that makes me mad. I always see those images that say, like, what if this were your sister? Like, why does it have to be your sister? It's a human being. It's a person. That just makes me mad. But Pornhub specifically is under scrutiny right now, because there are a lot of victims of human trafficking on that site. Unfortunately, people think like, oh, well, the porn industry, all these people are doing this consensually. They're getting paid for it. Like, no, there are videos on the web of non-consensual sex, of people on drugs, way beyond their high beyond their wildest imagination, and being taken advantage of. That human trafficking does exist on these sites, and you don't know what you're watching, if it's consensual or not. Sorry.
Yeah. I love that, because, and one final thing, because I know we gotta wrap it up in the next few minutes, but I did want to say one comment about, I mean, this has been such a great conversation regarding pornography, and relating it to how men can step into the role to fight against sexual exploitation. And but specifically with pornography, and I think it extends so much beyond that for the man himself or the consumer themselves. Because what happens is, and we don't realize it either, and we don't really talk about it much, but you as a consumer are actually being affected and impacted. Watching this, like Horace was saying, like, oh my gosh, it was like he was kind of going into this trance and then stepping out of it, realizing, oh my gosh, I need to just close the browser because I feel this emptiness inside. You yourself as the human being is being, or you are being affected by watching pornography. You know, it may feel good in the moment, but afterwards you are affected. Your brain activity changes, your relationships then get affected, and your ability to have relationships successfully is in fact impacted. And the way that you interact with the world is affected. So if this isn't just a one-time thing, or I'm sitting for 5 minutes, I just need to do this. It draws you in like an addiction, but it's hurting you, right? It's in fact hurting the consumer, it's hurting you as well. So it's a dual-edged sword.
Rewires your brain too.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's taking a little bit of your soul away.
100%.
Yeah, and back to the question or the comment at the beginning where, you know, we're saying, like, men say, well, I can't help it, you know, at certain points. Well, I do believe that men, if they have imagined and even watched scenarios where men were not, you know, stopping, where there was not consensual sex, like you just mentioned, or where they're imagining themselves going down that path and not stopping, then you can rewire your brain. Your neural pathways are changing so significantly that could a man get to a point where he truly, you know, like doesn't stop or can't stop? I think you can get yourself to those places. And I think identifying that imagination and, you know, mental role play. I mean, we talk about it in the sports side, right? Whether it be a basketball shot or a golf swing, like you have to envision yourself doing it thousands and thousands of times, and you create that you know, mental muscle memory. So that is real. That is real. And so it doesn't matter if you think you would never do this or that, and you can just imagine it and you're fine. You take a couple years and you have imagined that thousands of times. I don't care who you are or how proper you think you are, or I come from, you know, I hold a good job. You can become the monster that we're talking about. And I think being aware of how that happens, we're aware of how that happens in other areas, and we're not making the connection. So I think for men to be aware that you can become the person that you think you would never become, just by doing something in private in your own brain.
That's really good, David.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean that's powerful right there. And you know, you've got to engage in this, you know, and because some of it's yourself. It's not just like talking with other people, but it's really internal too. And so with that, I know we're gonna have to close up, but we're so grateful that you guys could join us and to be a part of Cup of Hope. We know that this is a pretty difficult topic. It can be. It's a pretty heavy topic, but Emily and I know that the whole point of this is to bring hope and to equip people who are listening with perspective and hope that something can be done. And so we encourage you to share a cup of hope, and we're just thankful that you could be here and listen.
Continue to have these conversations with your circle of people. Continue to speak up when you're in those with your boys. Just thank you for everyone who took the time to watch today, and thank you to our panelists.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's been a good session.
Thanks for having me.
So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you all for attending today's Cup of Hope panel. We appreciate your time and hope you found it valuable. On behalf of Hope Against Trafficking and the Michigan Abolition